Ashok has asked a question about the language you use in a press release and how you can try and minimize the chances of being taken out of context and so on. You know, I took to understand from what you just said that you'd be careful maybe not to overhype your findings, was one thing. But I wonder also, in such a fast moving situation, as Christiane said, you know, what was true 10 years ago is not true, is not science today. But also, I mean, you were in a situation where what was true last week was not necessarily true today. And you know, do you have to maybe prepare people for that, to tell people how you expect this might change, or that this is, you know, very conditional information that you're giving them?
Yeah, I think definitely, especially with regards to the work that I do in modeling, is I think can be misinterpreted by a lot of people, that, you know, that we're just kind of making things up, which is definitely not the case. It's bringing together different sources of information and trying to show, in particular, where we're uncertain about certain elements and where new data could, you know, improve our understanding. So we're very clear about that, and we state the assumptions up front, and we say, you know, and it's particularly in something that's fast evolving like COVID, that data that you had to make an assumption about the week prior could become, you know, could come out the week after, or even your modeling could prompt a study to take place that would allow you to improve your estimates, or, you know, improve that assumption. So yeah, that's very useful. But I think, yeah, you just need to be very clear about the uncertainties and say, you know, we need to carry out more studies, and like you say, don't over-egg it, especially with regards to things that are fast developing and uncertain. But just be very clear about what the main findings are in that context.
You said also that you know, encourage people to look for support. Lyndall said in her introduction that it's important to think about, you know, the sources of support. But you also thought about people, colleagues around you as well, who you know, could be there to support you, could lean on, or get their insight and help. So you mentioned friends, but I think also building a network of colleagues who could be supportive was important for you.
Yeah, definitely. I was very lucky at LSHGM to have some people who were very adept at science communication, people like Adam Kachalski and Ros Ego and John Edmonds and others, who were very happy to kind of coach, or, you know, have a kind of a little, you know, pre-game before you actually interact with the media, just to make sure that you're kind of prepared. So that's very important. And also, you know, you can kind of look a bit further than within your organization. So this is what was great about Twitter, is that there was lots of scientists who were really engaged in what was happening at the time, and would be willing to chat through. And, you know, Twitter kind of acted in a kind of informal peer review at the time. So in addition to all the bad parts, it was actually good for things like that, and you kind of formed a kind of support network in that way. So that was quite nice.
Very good, very good. Nick, I really want to come to you on this question, because obviously, you know, it's great if you were in a country researching where you've got a science media centre, or your university has the kind of resources to provide insight into handling the press or handling politicians. But not everybody is in that situation, and not every context is friendly to researchers raising a voice in public discussion. I wonder, are there any sort of thoughts you have around this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, so there are a few things that I have been reflecting on from the other speakers. And I think I'll start just by saying, you know, even in countries where you might think that they are friendly to research, as you were saying, Tracy, it depends on the research, right? Because some areas are very contested, and others are not. They're part of what they would call established consensus. So I think that even where we have social media centers, science centers and so on, there is still a need for us to be vigilant. There are a couple of things I wanted to kind of just pick up on and really reinforce. And the first is kind of going back to what Billy was observing. There are two things about science and the practice of science which are really challenging when you're communicating beyond research communities. And the first of these is the issue of uncertainty. I often say to people that science is not so much about the establishment of truth as it is about the incremental systematic diminution of uncertainty. And that's quite a significant difference, but it's a really important one to communicate, and a very challenging one to communicate. And the second thing, and I see this all the time, is that scientific progress depends on a certain kind of organized skepticism, which means that the debate and contestation of research findings is fundamental to our practice. Again, a very difficult thing to communicate beyond science. I give a really concrete example. I was happened to be at an event where I was speaking to the oversight board for Meta, and I was talking to them about why, about a lot of the misinformation around COVID at the time. And one of the board members said, well, the thing is, you scientists, you don't even know what's true. So how are we supposed to step in and do any kind of mediation on this? And, and it's a genuine question from the perspective of somebody who does not operate within the context of science. And the reason I say this is because I think it's really helpful, as Billy was saying, to be very aware of the areas that are going to be challenging. And those are understanding the issues around uncertainty and this organized skepticism, and anticipating the ways in which it will be a problem. The other thing that I really, and this is a bit more controversial, but I really want to put this out there because I want to challenge ourselves around this. And I think we have to move away from an idea of a general public. And I think really try to focus and think quite carefully about constituencies. What's the constituency that you really need to engage with here? What are their belief systems? What's driving the way that they're thinking? Even a constituency that might be particularly oppositional to the research that you're doing, anticipating where that might be coming from. My own feeling is that actually many times it's better to work with allies and those that are in some kind of political proximity than trying to think, oh, I'm going to go out now and convert those people that are completely on the other end of the spectrum. And use that really very carefully in the way that you think about the media that you might speak to, the intermediate agencies that you might engage with, that kind of thing.
That's such a good point. And I was thinking the same thing when Linda was talking as well about the value of mapping. And it can even be a very rough, map, but when you're thinking about what ideas are out there about the work you're doing, but actually mapping where they're coming from, who's motivated in what way, and thinking about what questions those people might be driven by. Because sometimes it comes out as a row about the science, but actually what's behind that is some people are feeling not listened to, or they're actually asking a different question from what your research is asking. So we could think about perhaps encouraging people to map out those different constituencies. I think that would be a really helpful thing. Now, Lyndon, I have to come to you because there's mounting concern in the Q&A, and I should say to everyone listening and involving yourself in this, please do get involved in the Q&A. Just put your question up and we'll try to get to it as much as we can. So there's mounting concern about how do you spot when something isn't maybe in good faith, when things could turn nasty. It's, someone maybe contacts you with a question, you don't realize that they're actually baiting you into some sort of unpleasant debate. Have you got anything to say there? I think Gia was saying, concern about, feeling unsafe, and I'm going to come to a question about peers in a moment. But also Daniel was raising this question, Jimmy's raised this question. So have you any thoughts on that? Red flags. Let's go back.
I guess I mentioned kind of looking for red flags around particular people. I think looking at other ways they've engaged with other scientists, actually going back and looking potentially at people's profiles and how they're engaging more broadly, what they're sharing and things like that can really help you make that decision of, is this someone that is potentially worth engaging with? And I think keeping in mind, there is that kind of silent majority often who might agree with you or might support your research and that you don't necessarily hear from, and putting what can be a very loud, sometimes negative voice in perspective, but really thinking about, does this person reflect, the people that my research is aimed at? Do they represent my funders, or who are they representing, or are they just someone very, very noisy out on the internet that likes to share their opinion very loudly? and really making that assessment of, is this somebody who has genuine concerns and really reflects a group that is important to me in my research before you decide whether it's worth your time engaging or responding. And taking some time. I think that's a really key thing in this space. You know, we all feel that need to kind of react when we're accused of something, or, you know, jump in and kind of defend ourselves, but it's that instant back and forth that is the trolls' reward. Often it's the disruption and the aggression and the anger that they kind of try and create in people. So actually just taking a step back, giving yourself, you know, some time, giving yourself a break, and really making that decision whether you do want to respond, because sometimes just having a vent to your neighbor is as sort of rewarding as actually responding, and does less damage in the long term.
Yeah. Do you know, the other thing that I've noticed over the years with the public is that sometimes people have to psych themselves up to get involved in a discussion, and that will often come out in quite an angry sounding statement. And they don't intend it to sound that way. And sometimes if your first engagement back is that kind of to fire back, it escalates everything. Whereas if you actually just ask someone to think about the question they're asking you a bit more, and show a little bit of empathy, you'll often pull out, you know, a good side of them that isn't coming across in their first social media response. They maybe calm it down a little bit. So that seems to me quite a good way of just testing it out, not reading too much into people's first comment, because sometimes people just don't really quite know how to formulate the question that's bugging them, and give them a chance to do that well. There's also, I think, something to be said for building your relationships with your peers, isn't there? About, you know, having conversations with them. And as Gia was asking earlier, you know, should you share the experience of harassment with others? And I imagine your answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah, look, we've done some workshops here in Australia where we pulled together experts who'd been like quite severely harassed. And actually just getting everybody in the room together to share their stories was such a powerful experience. And they all walked away and said that was like just that feeling of, I'm not alone in this, because it can feel very, very personal and very isolating to be attacked like that. And sometimes, you know, you might not be able to share that experience within your institution, but there might be other peers who are working on the same topic, you know, and just sending them a quick DM and saying, hey, this is happening to me. Have you got any advice? Or has this ever happened to you? And putting a call out even for some sort of digital allies to jump into that debate and just call it out as abuse and harassment, if that's what you're experiencing, can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And Christiane, we've talked here about institutions, we've talked about, you know, peers and other networks of support, but of course, publishers actually are sometimes a bit of an untapped resource in terms of the experience that you have, that you can support people whose papers you publish, you can give them guidance, help them to think about the stories that might run. As a result, people could lean into publishers when we're talking about a published paper.
Absolutely, I was reflecting about that sometimes it's low on people's radar, but you're working with professional editors. Cellpress has a marketing office, but also a press officer that can help you craft press releases, that can guide you through, and the editors are there to help you. And we always talk about the journey of a scientific paper, right? Since it's produced, then it gets the peer review debate that hopefully makes it better, the editor's input. So by the time your paper appears, it's much better, hopefully, and much more clear. And we can continue that journey of the paper in what we call the post-publication dissemination together with you. So never hesitate to talk to your editor. In Cellpress, we even have the Meet the Editor. So they have their calendar open. You click on one of them and you can just have a Teams meeting with them and ask them whatever. So yeah, that's unique of Cellpress, I would say. And it's super popular. And the editors, because they are all in-house editors, so they are professional editors, but they were scientists before, they love it. So don't be shy. They really, they stop every meeting. They come back from holidays sometimes. They love that they don't have unlimited time, but they can always channel you to, let's put it, an easier, proper way of post-publication dissemination. And again, I can't stress enough what was said before about don't overstate your claimings. When I was a scientist, we were always saying, be careful of the title of your publication, right? You have to be absolutely clear. And I would say you have to be double careful when you broadcast your message out there, that there is no way it can be interpreted in the wrong way or taken out of context. That's also another occurrence. And then basically it's an imperfect word, so you still can have aggressive reactions, emotional reactions, harassment, but that's a different story. That's about what the other panelists are talking about, how to react to that.
Yeah.
We can definitely help.
Yeah, brilliant. That's fantastic message. We've got some questions, and please do keep your questions coming. We will really try and squeeze in a bunch more. We've got some questions about when researchers should respond publicly and privately and not at all. And in particular, I wanted, Billy, I'm going to come back to you on this particularly as well, to have all of you to have a think about this question. When you go private, does it mean that you're perhaps at risk of things happening that other people don't see, or is it sometimes taking the heat out of the situation? I think that would be a good question for everyone here to think about. Before we come to that, I want to also ask a related question, which is when should you correct? You know, there are times, aren't there, when people point something out about your work and it maybe is really valuable to stop it sort of running or getting out of context, and you should sort of jump in quickly. I don't know, Billy, did you have any experiences like that where you sort of thought, oh God, that's going to sound terrible if people misunderstand that, we need to jump and clarify?
Yes, definitely. And I think I think like you said earlier, there's definitely good faith critiques that come out, and it's good to engage with those, and particularly try and clarify any parts, because often when this work is released, especially during COVID, it was in the preprint stage, so this is like pre-peer review, and could be quite raw in a way, or we had to produce short reports for Sage, so these weren't even necessarily publication stage, so they're quite short and brief, so there's the potential for misinterpretation was quite high, and I think as long as it's a good faith criticism, I'd always engage with that, and like you say, try and correct people's interpretation, and I'd usually do that on a tweet, or even simple misunderstandings I think are important. That could be in the replies to your tweet, and you could just repost that so more people see that. That'd be one way to do it. Cool. If it's bad faith harassment or trolling, then I'd just generally ignore all those. There's no point engaging with those in any way. So that was kind of my tactics there.
Very useful. Lyndall, hope you're on mute.
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes you can, people don't realize that they are being kind of abusive, or that they're calling for something that could turn into a pile-on. And so, we've had some success, obviously, like just direct messaging people and saying, hey, that tweet that you just sent out maybe could be interpreted in a really wrong way. We're trying to reduce the levels of harassment people are experiencing, and this is going to increase it. Could you reword it or rethink it? And quite often people have said, oh, that's really not what I meant to do. I'll take it down. So sometimes, having a kind of offline private chat like that can have an impact. But I think if you've made a mistake, actually a good correction and acknowledging that mistake can build trust with people, and being quite open about the fact that, we were working on limited data, or, we did get that figure wrong, or, the decimal points in the wrong spot. apologies and just be really upfront about correcting it and sometimes almost embracing that criticism, because as Nick said, it is a really crucial part of science.
Great. Nick, are you receiving? Okay, I'm going to come to you, Christiane, on correction.
Sorry?
Hello, Christiane.
Yes.
Sorry, I think I might have glitched then. I'm coming to you on correction, the point about correction.
Yeah, as I said, science is not infallible. So before we publish a scientific paper, it is peer-reviewed, but there can be cases where the information is wrong. Sadly, there are cases of fraud, so the paper has to be retracted. But it can also be a mistake, an honest mistake. And let's put an example so that you understand it. Roughly, if it's on a medical paper, it will also have to be retracted, because otherwise people are using it. Okay, so the mistakes occur is not a large number, but it is the way science goes, right? And it doesn't mean that every mistake is caught on time. And we are constantly investing and developing tools to detect mistakes like figures that have been manipulated. For instance, that happen. People do manipulate data, figures, just to say something that the data don't claim. Or they use plagiarism. They copy the work of somebody else and publish it as their own. There are more and more tools that allow us to do that automatically, because the best outcome is the wrong science that got never published. We can retract, but we need to catch it before, okay? So yes, correction is active, but again, in this world of ever-changing, the tools, the databases, and also I want to stress, I work for Elsevier, but the detection of unethical papers is a cross-publishing initiative. So we work together on that. We share resources, we share learnings, and hopefully that can accelerate what we call the degree of integrity of research. We aim to 100%, okay?
Brilliant. I think all those things are very important, but I think the crucial thing, as you say, is even where you think perhaps just clarification is needed, then of course you're in the world of social media, and what a great opportunity researchers have these days to be able to correct things in the world of social media, because in the past obviously it was a lot more tricky, and for those more subtle issues perhaps not so worth doing. But Nick, we've heard about trust, being trustworthy, and let's just take a minute. I'm going to give each of our panelists a minute or so to reflect. Let's take a minute to think about what can researchers do to encourage better understanding of the process of science, and what they should trust and not trust, and what they should question and criticize. I mean, can we try and advance a bit on having some shared space, shared understanding?
Okay, I mean, it's a super interesting question. I just want to take a moment, though, to reflect on this, the point about when to respond. And I think, if you indulge me for a few seconds here, there are a few things I think that you can consider here. One is actually thinking about the consequences, because I think, as Christiane says, it is almost inevitable that somebody will misrepresent, misunderstand, that you will get responses that are critical. Right. So it's kind of here, what you're doing is thinking about when you're going to do that. So you think about the consequences. Is this particular take on my research actually a particular significant consequence? If not, again, I would suggest you don't stress yourself. The person who is behind this, do they have an influencer status in terms of the number of followers that they have, or the constituency, or because of their position? Is it a good faith mistake or not? Because if it's not a good faith mistake and it's basically coming from a position that's entrenched around what we would call disinformation, probably best not to worry. And when you respond, I would suggest always your first response should be with the assumption of good faith. that actually, if you are clear with this person about what is going on, that they will take it on face value. I mean, we get a lot of this chemical and engineering news published by the ACS, American Chemical Society. You can imagine there's a lot of stuff when it comes to chemistry and chemicals, a very contested area. Now, to your specific question, Tracy, about what we can do to facilitate a shift in the way we understand trust is, I would suggest that actually an important thing is to go from the perspective of, I think Lyndall described it really well. I was thinking, start with empathy and being quite empathetic. Right. Do not, and I say all the time to folks, certainly within the magazine, let us not use anti-science, because the reality is that everybody believes in some bit of science. And often what happens is that they have found a particular issue that, for a variety of reasons that, you know, I was describing earlier, they have an issue with this particular position that's adopted by a particular area of research. And if we start from that assumption, then what happens is that it doesn't escalate the issue, because now it's not all of science as an establishment against you, but it's, you have a particular concern about this particular thing. Let's understand what it is that's driving this.
That's very useful advice. Very useful advice.
And
Nick, I'm going to have to
escalate it to trust. Yes. Yeah,
excellent. That has all been really useful advice, I think, actually, particularly the bad faith, good faith point. I'm going to come now just to some final comments. And this, you've just talked about empathy. Badar talked about empathy in an AI-driven world in the questions, but I think more generally, everyone's talking about empathy and human conversation. And I think I'm just going to run really quickly with just half a minute each to Lyndall and Christiane and then Billy, to hear your thoughts too on what we can do to foster this kind of relationship dialogue that Nick's just described. Linda.
Yeah, I think it's really important to meet people where they are. We have a big sign up in our office that says, just use normal words. And we hit it on a daily basis, you know, because I think even just speaking in plain everyday language can really, really help bridge that gap. And a lot of the jargon we hear is not even subject specific jargon. It's just very academic language that kind of gets drilled into people, and acronyms and things like that are instantly alienating for people. So, you know, brilliant. Speaking to people in language that they understand.
Fantastic advice. Half a minute to you, Christiane.
I would say use your trusted network. You're not alone. Don't carry the world on your shoulders. Science is not made individually, it's in groups. There are trusted peers, there are trusted sources, and ask for help. These people will give you precious advice. That's me.
Thank you. Wonderful. And Billy, finally.
Yeah, I'd just say try and stick to the science, keep it brief and easy to understand, and yeah, don't get dragged into anything or a back and forth that's in bad faith. But yeah, try and engage in good faith, plainly and simply, and hopefully that'll go back and forth between you and the public, and the understanding will hopefully spread from there.
Fantastic. Wow, panel, what an enormous amount of advice and insight you squeezed into 1 hour for everyone. And I thank you on behalf of everyone listening and who will go on to listen, because I know that hundreds of people take a registration on these webinars in order to listen at their own more relaxed time zones. But thank you all very much. That was incredibly insightful. I think a wealth of information there. Please do visit researcheracademy.elsevier.com to see connections to the previous webinars and other resources that people have made mention of. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to my panel and to Billy for his insights right from the front line. You've been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.